So this session is for some of you that have already been a part of some of the roundtable discussions and some of the Steal This Idea stuff. This is another way to, as best I can, replicate what I find to be probably, and if you've presented, don't let me step on your toes here. The most powerful part of Camp TNI, and that is those back table and those hallway conversations. So this is the forum for that, for sharing ideas, stealing ideas, what have you there. The important part is that at the end of this, my hope is that you all walk away with something that makes your film production education better. Something that you can steal or adapt to your situation to make it better for your kids. And I think that a big focus of this may be, how are we going to teach the kids next year? What I'm seeing at the state level is there's not going to be a directive, but there are going to be options for totally online. Good morning, Chris. For blended. And then, there are some schools that have already said, and primarily it's private schools at this point, that have already said they're going completely online. So, it'll be an interesting year. And I think that this is a very important session to kind of address a lot of those things. So, hey, Paige Elks, get to hear that laugh hopefully in a bit. I'll do something stupid and let you open the mic and giggle a little. So the floor is open. I love film. I love all of that. I can't teach it because I don't have the patience. So not my strength at all. So I'd leave this to you guys, and I'll just kind of help the discussion as it goes.
Tom, can I go ahead and say something?
Yes, sir.
One of the discussions this week, and it's a common question I hear at Camp TNI, is folks will ask a presenter, well, how many people do you have in a group? And, what I tend to do is I'll look at, sometimes that's driven by the amount of equipment we have, but usually it winds up being 3 or 4. But truthfully, I kind of let the kids' chemistry drive that. People ask, well, do you pick the groups or do they pick the groups? Again, we start out, we are facilitators of the highest order, I think, in AVTF, more so than the academic partners. And I've done both, like a lot of you guys have. So what I like to do is I like to look at chemistry, not only with groups, but literally, like when it comes to plucking the fruit off the tree. Like right this time of the year, I'm already having conversations with my counselor, and I'm saying, hey, I want this kid. Can I get this kid? I'm communicating with the middle school. Who's coming up? And if kids say, well, I want to be in the same class with this one here, as long as it's not a trouble situation, why wouldn't you do that? They have good chemistry together. The Star Wars people, that's what Lucas did. He had, Luke, Leia, and Han all read together. And when it came down to casting Han Solo, you had Harrison Ford over there swinging a hammer, and he said, hey, come in here and read with it. He did it better than anyone else. So when I have kids that have good chemistry together, I keep them together, and I'll let them make projects together for 4 years. I've got kids right now that are doing things for me at home. Why wouldn't you do that? I've got this one kid, he's literally a freshman. He's one of those that's into like dark web stuff and all that stuff. He knows about that more than what I do. That's where I get my info from. So I'm just constantly feeding him positive projects. I'm like, hey, I need you to work on this. Can you get this turned around in a day or two? As long as he's doing it, isn't that what we're there for? So I got him working on stuff right now. I'll roll them all in together. And I just keep encouraging those partnerships and stuff like that. And we're turning out good products. So as long as we're doing that, why wouldn't you let the kids kind of choose their own? So that's one thing that's really worked well for me. And that is a big stretch for me because I am traditionally an old rules, hard and fast, it's got to be this way kind of guy. But I have learned through AVTF, you don't have to be the toughest guy in the valley just because you can be. Lighten up, and it works.
And,
can I share on that? What I have them do is rate themselves. Like they have, they rate themselves on color Post-it notes. Just at the beginning of the class when we were all in the same room, and they get to mingle and talk. And I said, once you rate yourself on these, like, are you a leader? Are you organized? We're talking about a producer. We're talking about somebody. Do you like technology? Because you're going to always need somebody who can figure out something for you. Do you like to speak? And are you really into the writing scene? And then the graphics, like, are you into graphics, making things look great? Can you be the person to be the lead on that? If everybody will get a chance to do all these things in your group, but we want to have somebody who's able to say, well, here, I know how to do that, or I can help you with that, or let me look at that. And then once they've rated themselves, I give them 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how they're really like doing it. And I say, okay, now go. You have to have a mixture of boys and girls, and you want to get not everybody on the same level, even if it's your BFF, resist the urge. And I said, and then go ahead and pick your teams. And so thus far, it's worked. And I've never had to yet, knock wood, had to like break up a team because they weren't productive or because, it was goofing around. They chose their team, so they owned it. And they would move through the projects and do what they have to do and get on each other and, that kind of thing. And when they feel like they can't, within the group, they swap out. Okay, well, you better do this because it turns out I'm not that good at it after all.
And what I do is totally different from both of what you all do. What I do is day one, I come in with index cards, and I'll put either numbers on them or letters on them. So in other words, I'll figure out how many students I have. Then I may put 5 A's, 5 B's, whatever. And then I pass out the cards as they come in. And then I eventually say, okay, now we're going to break up into teams. And I'll say all the A's, you go over with all the A's, all the B's, blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell them, okay, you all are teams for the next 2.5 months because we do block, and our block are 5 months. So, and the reason I don't let them choose is because I don't want them hanging out with their friend. The other reason why I do it is because I'm always trying to teach life skills. In real life, you're going to work with somebody you don't know. You're going to work with somebody you don't like. So I'm always trying to teach them life skills that you got to get along with people to do a job. So after 2.5 months, I'll then come back and say, okay, do you all want to switch teams? 9 times out of 10, they want to stay in the same team. So I try to put them to whereas I want to see who has the strongest strength. And then as I watch what they do, they learn from each other, and they may learn that so-and-so wants to be the director. So-and-so wants to write. So-and-so wants to do this. But then what I tell them is as we do projects, everybody's gonna do everything just so you know. So my approach is a little different from you all's, but whatever works. But I like to teach them what's going to happen in the real world because, if you leave it up to them, they're going to pick their friends and then they're going to be playing around all the time. And I don't have time for that.
Yeah, and I do probably 7 or 8 labs over the first 6 weeks in AVTF1. We have Canvas as our learning management system, and it will randomize the groups. And so I use that for each of those labs and randomly put them in groups until they sort of work with a number of different people. And then I start putting them in groups based on what I observe during those labs. And then in level 2, we start off, I continue to put them in groups, and then I sort of slowly let up to where by the time they get to level 3, they know who can do what. And then I sort of I give them a lot more freedom unless things completely fall apart. And I tell them like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to go back to putting you in groups, because they start asking me like week 1, do we get to choose our own groups? That's in level 1. Can we choose our own groups? Do we get to choose who we work with? And I'm like, nope. I do that all through level 1 and make that very clear. And that way I tell them, I want to see who actually does work and who actually learns the stuff. And then I'll try to put you guys in groups where I think you'll work well together.
In my intro class, when I'm teaching AVTF 1, for our very first video project, we just kind of do a composition scavenger hunt. After we learn about all the shots, go now shoot these shots. And I teach a lot of freshmen in that level 1 class. And just like you, they're always asking me, can we pick our own groups? So for that first project, I let them, hey, pick your best friend or whatever, and you guys can work together. And it is always a disaster. And so I let them fail in that way so that it's a learning experience for them. And then after that point, I say, see, it's not always best when you work with your friends. And I pick their groups from then on just for the level 1 class.
So how do you guys handle equipment? How do you handle distribution and collection of equipment and kind of managing? I don't think any of us have all the equipment we want. So how do you handle that?
Well, when I have the only time my students can actually take out equipment is film 2, film 3. So anytime they take out any equipment, they sign off for every piece of equipment they take out. I look at it before they walk out the door, and when they bring it, I find out when they're bringing it back, and when they bring it back, I check it before I sign off on it to make sure it still works, because they'll throw it in the bag and keep stepping. Year before last, I didn't catch one of my students, and he was using a lens from a DSLR camera, and I didn't check it, and that was on me, but I know who had it. And when it came time to teach the class using DSLR, apparently he had dropped the lens because the lens was smashed in and was crooked, but he graduated, he was gone. So I had to order a new lens. So I make sure that I check everything before they walk out the door, and check everything when they come in. Once I check everything is there, then I sign off on it. They know that's the way that they're going to be able to get equipment. And I tell them, this equipment, you're responsible. You leave it on the bus, you leave it in the trunk of your car, you leave it on the seat. You are responsible. I make that perfectly clear before they take any of the equipment out, because when I tell them in film 1, film 2, film 3, you can take equipment out, the eyes get big. Because not, oh man, I can take this $5,000 camera out. Yeah, but you're responsible for it. It's not a toy. So everything they take out, they sign out for. Now in class, they just get whatever they need. And then I make sure once everybody is done and class is almost over, then they put everything back where it was, and they just don't leave it lying around everywhere. So I keep up with everything they touch.
I was going to say that it has taken 9 years, but for the first time ever, we didn't have a single piece of equipment go missing. And we had one that was damaged, and it was immediately replaced by the kid because of what we signed. And so I think we finally have a good system going. We actually cut into our door for our equipment room. We have a long control room, so it's the span of our class. And we cut into a half door, and only managers are allowed in that room, and you have to earn that privilege. You apply to be a manager, and there are certain stipulations the kids have to meet. But you go to the window and you basically place your order. So I'm assigned gear number 8. So I would go to the order window, talk to the manager. I need equipment 8. The managers would get the hall pass. It's like a clip-on pass that they wear. Get their camera, get their tripod, get whatever audio equipment they need. Checklist hanging on the door. Check it. This person has taken it out. They go out for the class. Or if it's the end of the day, they take it for the end of the day. And then they have to return it before the bell rings the next day, or 10 minutes before class is over. But we kept it really strict, really organized. It also increased the amount of time that checkout and check-in takes, but it was absolutely worth it, because I would find a loose battery in bag number 4, and I could go to that list and be like, oh, look, Sarah had bag number 4 the last hour. I know exactly who did this. Take employability points, talk to her when she comes in the next time. But it was super efficient, and it was basically the way we did it. When I worked at a news station, that's how you did. You're assigned this gear. If anything happens to that gear, it's you. And And we were fortunate enough that only a few class periods had to overlap with sharing. So there were only maybe 4 or 5 cameras that were used second period and fourth period. But that, I'm not going to say it's perfect because I'm sure there are flaws, but it was dang close because we didn't have anything go missing this year. And I was really proud of that.
Sure. I don't suppose you have your procedures written up on that, do you?
Yeah, I do. It's kind of part of a bigger chunk of applying for classroom manager and then what those responsibilities are. And then I've just got the standard checklist of this person's assigned this equipment. And whenever they changed partners, I thought that was going to be a problem because everyone's assigned their camera, but then sometimes you'd partner up. I would say just choose whichever camera you like better. For when it comes to the DSLRs, we have T3, a 3, a 5, and a 7. And so my higher grade, if you have a higher grade in the class, you get assigned a 7. And so let's say you're partnered, a 3 and a 7 are partnered. I'd be like, take the nicer camera. And that way we're still keeping that accountability of, okay, now both of you are assigned this really nice camera. But yeah, it's a big,
you got those written down?
Yeah. So it's a big old chunk. It's more information than you would need. But yeah, I don't mind sharing that. I'll put it all together to kind of streamline things. But yeah, my big thing was nobody goes in that room unless you are assigned a manager position or you're me. And that was it.
Good morning. Mine has, I do it like you would check out a library book. So I'm connected with the Destiny system, and each student plugs in their school ID. It's taken a ton of time on the front end to coordinate the serial numbers with barcodes, et cetera. And that's what they do at the county office. But I'm telling you what, once they get the system down, I've got my little scanner, or I have one of my interns scan, and beep, 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 goes right in. If things don't come back, like there's a few things that are out right now because of the COVID thing. But and I've emailed those students and like, I don't have it. And I said, well, don't worry. When we get back, let's just check and see. And if it's there, great. And if not, guess what? You're responsible for it. Certain things, when I'm checking things out and in, I'll double check. I'll double check if I've got a handheld wired mic that I'm giving out to a level 1 student. I'm making sure the little on off button hasn't been mashed all the way in, and I'm check it all back in the same way. And that way I can say, nope, I looked at it. So it's just become a habit for me. And at the beginning of the year, I have a student packet I give them, and the students have to sign off on if I break it, I bought it. That's what I call it. That goes for negligence, whatever. Let's see, what else do I have? Permission to watch parts of a movie or a movie. We hardly ever watch movies. Permission to be videotaped and recorded and be posted anywhere on the internet, because I don't want any of that coming back to me. And if they don't get it signed, it's like, well, then, gosh, I don't know what you're going to do in my class. You may want to pick out a different elective. So I get those things right up at the front.
I see where somebody had said, how do you handle SD cards? What I do with Film One is we use what I provide in Film One. Film Two, Film Three, own SD card. Reason being is I find that whenever they start to shoot on one SD card, and I got 3 people shooting on 3 different cameras using one SD card, everybody's footage is on one SD card. So then when it's time to edit, I'll have somebody say, well, Mr. B, I can't edit. They're sitting around doing nothing, because they'll say, well, I can't edit because Joe has the camera and he's shooting now. So I tell them, bring your own SD card. Once you shoot your footage, take your SD card out. You can either keep it or give it to me, put your initials on it, give it to me. And that way, once you finish shooting your projects, you can edit anytime you want, because you have your own SD card. Plus, I do that to teach responsibility. You lose this SD card, that's all of your footage.
I asked that question because I wrestle with SD cards. I make it a requirement, and I'll have one student bring one. And then I'm told, well, you can't really make that a requirement. I'm like, I don't understand why they're $5 on Amazon. So I have a sticker system where I have these little trays I got at the dollar store that you put screws and stuff in. So I have matching stickers. So Spider-Man goes on the card, Spider-Man goes in the hole, and kids understand they have Spider-Man card. But we still have the problem with, you know, they're easy to put in your pocket. I do it all the time. I have to check my pockets every day before I do laundry because I'll have cards and batteries and stuff in them. But I'm trying to get a feel for what's the norm around as far as requiring students to provide them, because I've heard through the grapevine that I'm not really supposed to require them to buy them.
Hey, Eve, I require all of my students to provide their own SD card. I put it in the rubric and I have a picture of what it should look like. I tell them to stay away from the micro SD cards and stuff like that. But my way out of that is I say, if there is any trouble, if you're going to have a problem purchasing an SD card by Friday or whatever my deadline is, come see me before or after class and we'll work something out. Because I have tons of SD cards. I don't mind loaning out for the year if a student honestly can't get one. But if you say that, I guess in 3 years that I've been doing it that way, I think I've had maybe 2 students come to me and say, Miss Miller, legitimately, I'm not going to be able to get to the store to get one. And I've said, no problem. And I've given them one of our class stash. But other than that, I have students buy them. But if you say, you know, if you have an issue, you can't get one, just come see me privately and take care of it that way. That's always worked for me.
I have the opposite, where I've had a total of 2 students bring an SD card. And then we go to shoot and no one has a card. And I just wondered if I'm the only one who has that situation where my cameras run off cards and it's shoot day and nobody has a card. So that may be unique to my school.
I have trouble sometimes getting people to get cards, but what I started to do is also put it in my syllabus, asking them to bring it. But I also ask students, if you can't go get it, bring in $7 and then I will, you know, purchase it for you. And so that has gotten a little better. And for me, I think I'm gonna try earlier this upcoming year or whenever we go back to school. And then I will also give them a timeline.
I'll also say that I've done numbers and letters on my cards that I do hand out, and stickers work the best. They cannot remember a number, they cannot remember a letter, but they know if Spider-Man is on that, or they'll run into my room and say, have you seen Taco? So I have Taco, Pizza, Spider-Man, all the characters. So if you're looking for a system to organize the cards you do have, I will recommend putting stickers with images that they're familiar with on them. Though I learned that,
Eve, how do you use a sticker? Wouldn't it stop it from sliding into that little slot?
no, as long as that sticker is within the sticker that's already on the SD card, it doesn't. So I have to cut them to make them fit. But I use, like, I have a whole Christmas fleet with Rudolph and Bumble and the elf, and they don't know Bumble. They call him the Yeti. They don't know Rudolph's name. They called him Randolph. But anyway, they can remember those images rather than I was on card 12. So I don't know if you're like me, and I do deal out a lot of cards. I have found that using an image that they're familiar with works a lot better than numbers and letters. And then I just have the matching little tray. And so I can look at the tray and see, well, Thor is not in the right place, or Thor's not here. Who has Thor? And that helps me keep track of the ones, because inevitably I provide SD cards. I don't know a way around that. And I'm not allowed to collect money either. So I appreciate your your sentiment. I'm not allowed to do that either. So anyway, I just wanted to share my sticker system and see if I was the only one who has kids who won't bring cards.
Let me state that I also have maybe 3 or 4 cameras that don't need SD cards. So sometimes somebody doesn't have a card, they have to use one of the cameras that don't require one.
I've also said to kids, figure it out. What are you going to do? And sometimes they'll sit around. Sometimes they'll ask other kids for cards. And sometimes they'll say, can I use my phone? I say, good, do it. Because in the real world, they've got to figure out what's going on. So, I do give them to my level 1 students, but not the 2, 3, 4s. They've got to figure it out. It's time to troubleshoot. What do you do? How are you going to do it?
Yeah, and I agree. I try to always give them an opportunity to figure something out, because in 4 years, you're going to be out of school and you're going to be on your own. And, some of us are not as fortunate to have our parents there to help. And you need to be a young adult. You always hear you want to be treated like a young adult. Well, this is how you become an adult. You have to be independent. And like I was saying about the cards, if I do get students who I know can't afford a card, then I do give them a card. But again, I'll tell them, okay, I'm going to let you use my card, but when you do your finished project, I'm taking 5 points off. And they'll look at me and they'll say, I say, yeah, reason being is because I know you can't afford this card, but you all spend more when you go across the street to Cookout. So, some of them just don't want to spend the money to do it. But I have to say that the majority of the time, they pop in there with their card. They're happy that they have their card, and it works out really fine. Like I said, once they finish their project, Mr. B, can I have my card? Yep. And they edit and they take their time and do what they need to do. But my thing is, I'm always, always, always trying to teach, a life skill, because a lot of them don't have anybody trying to teach them what's going to happen when you turn 18 and you get out of my house or you stay in my house. You still have to be responsible. You either have to get a job, or either you have to get a job and go to school, but you're not going to sit around. So I'm always trying to teach something about being responsible. And I think that it is getting there, because after we did our little virtual graduation, I had one of my students text me and say, Mr. B, I really appreciate the fact that you pushed me, and you really, really, one of the best teachers that I had. So, when you hear little stuff like that, even if you had 50 students and you hear from one, that you're doing what you need to do. So, even though they may not like you pushing them, they may not like you hounding them, they're learning. And at the end, sometimes they will come back and tell you they appreciate it, because nobody else is doing it for them.
When it comes to editing, how do you guys facilitate your kids editing? Not everybody can be one-to-one, and you certainly don't want 20 of the same thing. How do you make sure that all of your kids know the full process and aren't just focusing on the shooting and and then they do the full process?
I require everybody to edit. I may have students working in a group, but when it comes time to edit, everybody in the group has their own edits. I have enough computers usually where that works. But my thing is that I want everybody to learn how to do everything, because I tell them all the time, when I started, one of the jobs I had in the industry, I worked for a small production company. And so I was required to do everything. So I believe that nowadays companies, and I wouldn't hire anybody who was able just to do one thing. I want to get my money's worth. So I want to make sure you can do all the jobs that I would need anybody to do.
And I agree. I have 17 computers. So every student has their own computer to edit. So whenever we do individual projects, they have to edit their project. They have to do the storyboard, write the script. They have to find the actors to do it, whether it's classmates or their friends that they can get off during that time. And the only time when they don't have to edit is when I tell them it's a team project and they have to figure out who's going to write the script, who's doing the storyboard. But I agree, they need to learn how to do everything, because once you get in the industry, if you're doing lighting and the lighting person doesn't show up and the director says, well, I need somebody to do lighting, and you say you can do lighting, that's going to give you some props. So I try to tell them, I teach them how to do everything from writing a script to lighting to editing to acting. I teach them the whole gamut.
I am not one-to-one in my classroom. I have 10 computers in the classroom and usually have 30 to 33 students. So when I teach editing, I have them work in shifts. So 10 of them will be editing, and then 10 of them are doing another project, 10 of them are working on something else. And we just cycle through for a few weeks so that I can assess that everyone knows how to use the editing software. We have Premiere Pro now. I started off with DaVinci Resolve. And that they know how to get footage in, how they can cut on a timeline, add transitions, add text, and export. Those are the main things that I want them to learn in level 1. In level 2, I have some projects where the footage is already shot. And then they have to, there's 2 or 3 of those projects to where they're editing on their own. When it comes to their group projects, unfortunately, I don't have the time or the number of computers to have them each do their own individual edit. I would love to do that. It just isn't practical for my classroom. But I do have individual editing projects that they're required to complete.
Hey, Jeffrey, can I ask you a question about DaVinci?
Sure.
Okay, so we have Adobe Premiere Pro, and you've used DaVinci. What are your thoughts on one versus the other? And did you have the free version of DaVinci, or did you have the paid version?
Oh no, I had the free.
Had the free.
I didn't. Yeah, I started out. I didn't get the Adobe Suite for almost a year and a half, and so we used Resolve exclusively. It was funny actually when we switched over to Premiere Pro. The students that had learned on Resolve preferred Resolve. I tell them, look, you're only going to be more marketable if you learn more than one. So even now that we've moved to Adobe, I'll say, look, because we have device licenses, so they can't install it with the school license at home. So I'll say, look, you can go between Resolve and Premiere Pro, and I can show you how to do that. You might as well learn how to do both. Now, as far as my own personal preference, professionally, I use Final Cut Pro. So, and I actually prefer that. So
that's what I use.
I use Final Cut. I teach Resolve. I teach Premiere Pro, and I tell the students, look, they all do the same thing. They just look different, and it's whatever tool fits the job and whatever you have access to. So, a Premiere Pro honestly is actually probably my least favorite, but I use it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm like you. I was used to Final Cut Pro, and it just seems faster to me. But maybe it's just I'm getting older and I'm trying to learn Premiere Pro.
Yeah, it was also practical. When we were purchasing equipment for the program, it wasn't practical to have a Mac lab. With the cost, and so
right.
I made that decision to use Windows because our system has the contract with Dell, and so I've made that work. But yeah, professionally, I use Macs and Final Cut, so I just cross over.
That's good to hear. Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
All right, so the elephant in the room. What does this year look like?
Well, I'm in Henry County, and I learned through Facebook yesterday that my superintendent did an article with a big magazine. So they didn't tell us this, but they're going to give families the option to stay home. And so some kids can come to school if they want to. And if you're able to keep your child at home, then you can keep your child at home. And all I know is what she said in the article. So as I'm talking with other teachers, we're concerned that we're going to end up making 2 sets of lesson plans. And after experiencing being shut down this time, I don't know how to do that. As far as my kids have no equipment, they don't even have computer chargers. I mean, they were given computer chargers. They don't have them. That's why nobody turned their work in. So I'm not really sure what to do with that. And so I'm concerned. And I'm most concerned about having to do a plan A for those students in front of me, and then a separate plan B for those students who choose to stay home. And then they said, well, if you go and you do it about 6 weeks and you don't want to stay home anymore, you can just come back to school. So now I have a plan C for the kid who missed, and we're going on block, so I've only got 18 weeks, who missed the first 6 weeks. He's now integrated back into the school, doing something completely different. So I have no clue. I welcome ideas, but I don't know if anyone else's district has done that. And again, I had to read that through a professional magazine for school leaders, and that was not given to us officially. So anyone else have any notice from your school?
Well, we didn't really get a notice. Yeah, I'm in Athens, Clarke County, and we didn't really get a notice, but we got like a survey of asking, would we be willing to do this, that, and the other? And one of the options was, would we be willing to come in come in physically half a day and then do virtual the other half? Well, for me, as far as doing film, and just like you all, our pathways are hands-on. So how that would work out for me is that for them to write a script, do a storyboard, all of that stuff, they don't have to be in class to do that. If you do a Zoom or whatever, you can teach them doing that from home. To do the physical part, they would have to come into the school. So for me, if they gave me that option, that would work for me. But nothing has been etched in stone. Those were just survey questions that they sent out and asked the teachers what did they want to do. But they also were saying something about every student that walked in the door would have their temperature taken. They would have gloves out. They would have mask out. The only thing with that, with me, is my question was to them, does that mean that every class I have to wipe everything down?
And who's buying all the, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think the wiping down is going to be our new normal for a while. I mean, it should be a part of our process with the kids when they return equipment. Just that's my 2 cents on the wipe down. It's going to be our new normal.
And what do we use that's not going to hurt the equipment? That's something as well.
I use lens wipes, and I bought a big pack of lens wipes, which are, I use them anyway for my lenses, but they're basically alcohol. So as we were leading into coronavirus, as soon as kids walked through my door, I handed them 2 lens wipes. And I said, one's for your hands, one's for your phone. Start wiping down, or wipe down your Chromebook. And they appreciated it. They really did. And I find that the lens wipes, they're not very liquidy. So I wipe down my computer keyboards and all the cameras and everything with those. So if you get your hands, or if you have I don't know, I mean, I'm assuming I'm not going to have any school budget this year as far as the money I normally get. I'll be lucky to have a job. So anyway, they're like $5 for a big box of 800, and I just use those because I find they dry really fast. They're actually designed for cameras, and they're basically 100% alcohol. And my dad's a pharmacist, and he goes, well, yeah, you can use these. So I didn't even buy hand sanitizer. I bought lens wipes, so that they're convenient, and it makes the kids feel special for some reason.
But shouldn't all of that stuff be in the budget, to where as they provide that for you, to where you're not using your, because this is like he was saying, this is going to be the new norm. They're going to have to provide these gloves. They're going to have to provide these masks. They're going to have to provide all this sanitizer and whatnot. And we're talking about block, and I have 5 months. So for 5 straight months, for 3 classes, for 30 plus students, they're going to have to provide that stuff.
You would hope so.
Yeah, but I find that we're, at least in my experience, my school doesn't even consider the fact that, there's an engineering class next to me, and they're using power tools. And there's a class with early childhood, and they've got little kids in there, that they're just worried about the everyday kid coming in the classroom doing English and math. And they don't even consider the fact that, you know, and they're talking about putting food in our rooms. And I was flat out, no food in my room. I've got $200,000 worth of equipment. You can't have Cheetos in here. And I think, well, I know that's a different topic, but that's the battle that I'm looking at fighting next year, is to keep the kids from eating lunch and breakfast in my room. But no, I usually get an allotment based on the number of students I have. So it's been anywhere from $1,200. Last year was $800. And I'm supposed to use that to buy what I need for my classroom, like tissue and paper towels and any replace broken equipment and things like that. So I'm assuming my lens wipes are going to come from that money, if there is that money.
So your CTAE director doesn't take care of that stuff for you? Because any equipment that I need, I put in an order and he signs off on it.
I get an allotment from CTAE at the beginning of the year, and it's depending on the number of students I had. So last year my allotment was $1,200, and then they took it back and said, nope, now you only have $800 because of budget cuts. And then I'm not, I'm assuming I'm not going to get any this year because they're talking about furloughing us. So I don't know.
Where are you at? What school are you in?
I'm in Henry County, and the furlough stuff is coming from the state.
Okay, we haven't heard anything about that yet.
Well, I'll have to share the article. The state of Georgia says they're going to cut 14% out of the money that they send to the schools.
So that's across the board. The furlough thing is across the board.
All schools, yes.
So let me put a little, I guess, perspective on this. This was in the AJC, and this is what the schools across the state are facing, and this came out of those recommendations that came from Dr. Wood in that cohort. The constant disinfection, the masks, the bus fuel, the technology, the bottled water fountains should be disabled in areas with moderate coronavirus spread. The extra staffing, because they're suggested more nurses, will all cost money. Some school leaders are trying to figure it out because meanwhile, the state is considering about $1.5 billion in education funding cuts. So it's across the board. What I'm hearing in terms of furloughs vary. Some are saying, hey, let's pack them all at the beginning of the year and start actual school in September, creating space for the virus to hopefully subside more, but also to allow teachers to prepare better, or bring some teachers in to do some collaborative planning to prepare better for this new world. The others are saying sprinkle it throughout, and others are saying to use it kind of like snow days, where if the pandemic flares up again, cue furlough days and go from there. I know that smaller counties like mine, for example, are looking for about $1.5 million, $2 million. They don't know where it's coming from. There's a county neighboring mine that's looking for $20 million. It's going to be interesting how the different school systems handle it. One of the things that is going to be interesting is, for my school system, we've been able to get into the building. We've been able to do whatever we need to do. And then there are other school systems that, key cards were disabled on March 13th. And, you have to make an appointment to go to your room to get stuff. So this year is going to be, where there's already a pretty vast difference in how each school and each program runs. This year is going to really be different. So, but Eve, I don't want to be a negative person, but plan on A, B, C, and D on your plans. I talked to somebody the other day and told them that this year really stunk. Second semester really stunk because there was no accountability. But I think that the systems are working to find that accountability for those who aren't going to engage remotely. So
the question is then, what do you do about equipment with kids working at home? And I know I've seen some of you guys' news shows that have been incredible. I asked mine to make a 6-word story and I got 2.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to that accountability piece. Once it kind of got out that people weren't going to be held accountable, you weren't going to get anything from them. Unfortunately, what my approach is going to be for the remote stuff is more theory than practical, and teach the theory with the option of practical. So teach the theory of shot composition. Hey, these are the different shot types, and then kind of divide projects into, I have technology, I want to be engaged, I want to learn, all the way down to, I just want to get through this semester. I don't really even care about anything. And that's kind of what I did this year. I had different options from, I have we all have those kids who are really engaged, really want to do stuff, all the way to those kids who wouldn't breathe if it wasn't automatic and mandatory. So consider that as you're planning, is give those different levels. And we have that time now to where we can think about that, So that's my option, and unfortunately, I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but I do think that that's something that we have to go ahead and come to grips with. Is that this year's going to be? We thought this semester was bad. I think that this next year, the uncertainty, the lack of fluidity and the lack of uniformity is going to be tough this year.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I could tell you about in Rome, a few decisions have already been made here. Our superintendent has been very proactive in trying to stay ahead of any decisions that are going to come from the state board. And I mean, it's already been announced. We're getting 3 furlough days. He's trying not to put any of the strain on teachers as much as possible. So like, we've already had 5 to 8 jobs cut at central office. That positions aren't coming back in anticipation of budget cuts. We're getting 3 furlough days, 2 pre-planning days, 1 post-planning day. They've already voted on that. And they're basically looking at 3 different options for our school year next year. They sent a survey to parents asking them, would you rather your kid do online learning versus in-person learning? And I can just tell you from what we saw in the second half of the school year with all online stuff, that a majority of parents want to send their kids back to school. I imagine it feels that way for most of the state, but where our buses were out running practice routes earlier this week because we're looking at cutting bus routes to save money and how many kids we can get on buses because it's only going to be a certain amount. One of the options we're looking at is busing in half of our students for the morning because we're still on a period schedule. So they do first, second, third period, eat lunch, go home. The second wave of students would come in, do fifth, sixth, seventh period, go home. Or, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule, something like that. So we're looking at a few different options, but budget cuts, yeah, our superintendent has already made a whole bunch of cuts across the board in anticipation of what the state BOE is going to do, and just trying not to affect the teachers. So we're lucky in Rome in that manner. We don't know what school's going to look like. We have a few ideas, but nothing hardcore.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, yes, we will still be working from home. And one of my thoughts is that I would get permission, go into the school and prepare some camera packages and hopefully be able to have students come in, pick up equipment and go back home and shoot. The other thing is, I don't know who else has a device license with Adobe, but Adobe opened it up so people can work from home. And so I had some students who were able to get on the system, but it seems like it still has some bugs in it because not everybody was able to do it. And so I plan on contacting them and talking to them to see if we can fix that issue some so that more students will be able to get Adobe from home without having to troubleshoot anything. And basically, I forget the link, but if you do a search, COVID-19 Adobe CC from home, there is a link there so that you can get directions on how to do that.
Talking about editing from home, our students have Chromebooks, and they have the Adobe license where they can edit from home, but unless they have another home device, that's not going to work on the Chromebooks. I use Clipchamp at the end of this year, just to kind of get them to turn in some videos. Do y'all know of any other free software for Chromebooks that works?
I don't know how much you would use, but WeVideo, Adam really sold me on that last week, both for at home and in person learning. Depending on the application and the way you can use it, you can monitor. So let's say instead of you having to go lean over the kid to go, hey, move that clip there. With WeVideo on the network side, you can tap into their machine and actually see them edit a little bit. So that's one that I've already started the conversation with, thinking long term of we're not going to be able to be in school and certainly not going to be able to necessarily snuggle up over a kid and help them, edit something. Adobe Spark is right, Chris. That's another option. WeVideo has some costs. I don't know. There's free levels. There's paid levels, but I don't know how it all breaks down off the top of my head.
Have any of you tried any of the free software for phones? Because that's what I did. And the kids were able to hand in some nice work with just things like, what did we use? Video Shop is one of them. But of course, then there's the excuses of why they couldn't. But the ones that did work, it worked well for them. They can trim their audio, they can trim their clips, they can move things around. It's really not a bad system.
Yeah, my kids use some free editing apps on their phones, and the students that actually turned in work, it looked pretty good because they had the ability to, yes, edit, trim, everything like that, but also create graphics as well to put in their videos. Besides the watermark on them, it definitely wasn't bad at all, and it was easy to navigate on their end. So, yeah.
Some of my students who had trouble getting the Adobe onto their system ended up using Adobe Rush on their phones, and that worked out.
Yeah, Adobe Rush is a great one. That's free and actually kind of gets them a little bit into the Adobe universe if they're back and forth between home and school. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Other thoughts, questions? Jeffrey says that Rush is free, but you can only export 3 projects for free. Makes sense. iMovie is free on iPhones. I don't know what the Android version of that would be. Anything else? Anybody got anything?
Can someone recommend camera equipment that you guys use, like boom poles or the zooms and all that? Because I know I've been active in this group a lot because this is my second year doing video, and I just want to make sure everything goes smooth. So what would you guys recommend equipment wise that's, I guess, cost effective, since as you guys been saying, we going into this year with a lot of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think the Zooms are kind of going to be the standard across the board in terms of audio. Any of the handheld stuff, Jason put the H4n as a Zoom, and specifically the H1 is a little cheaper. DSLR cameras are coming down in price. You can get some of the lower level Canon cameras for $300-400 a piece. For me, I may be completely off base on this, but the Canon Vixias, those little, they're like 4 inches long. I literally think you could hit them with a baseball bat and they would continue to work. I actually had one get hit with a baseball while it was the live camera. It didn't work anymore, but it worked until it exploded. But those cameras are $299, and you can get like there's the waterproof version. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do with those, and they're a great place to start if you're starting a program and looking for quantity over quality. The quality side is where it gets interesting because everybody's going to have a different idea on that one.
I agree. Starting with the Vixias, I've got several of them. When I did industry certification a gazillion years ago, I was given a grant and I bought, gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 of them, which was awesome because now I've got the Sonys that we got from the ESE grant. Those I use for my advanced level class. And my county actually bought me several of those a couple years ago, and those are workhorses too. But my level ones, they use the Vixias all the time. And the more cameras you can get in those kids' hands, that's when they're going to learn. They got to have it in their hands. They've got to be able to use it. So the more you've got, the better. Even like Tom said, if the quality isn't 100% the way you want it, that's fine. You're still teaching framing and editing and storytelling. Just get them started, and then you can build from there.
Yeah, and I think that if you teach them off-board audio capture, you're going to be fine. You're good if you're using a Zoom and one of those smaller. And 90% of our stuff is going to be shown or viewed, I guess I should say, on mobile devices. I mean, let's be honest, nobody's watching TV anymore, so you can take a lower quality image and it looks fine on a mobile phone. So, anything else from anybody before we wrap it?
I wanted to say one thing about editing and should you be out of the classroom. One assignment I give my kids is to either watch a movie or a television show with no sound and record the shots that they see, preferably something they don't know, and see if they can tell me the story without any audio. And I did this one time on an airplane. My headphones didn't work, and I could tell the whole story. And I'm like, well, this is edited super well because I now know everything about these people. So that's one of my kind of backup assignments that I have planned. Should we not be in the classroom for editing, is once you've learned the different shots, now, okay, go watch something you've never seen before, cut the sound off. And can you tell me the story? Do you understand what's happening based on picture selection alone?
All right. Anybody got anything else?
I'll add something. I would recommend to stay away from Rode video mics. They're garbage. They're like plastic. They're always breaking. If you just want to invest about $50 more, you can get a nice NTG2 or maybe something a little nicer. But yeah, stay away from Rode video mics. They're garbage.
All right. Anything else? Excellent. Well,
Wait, can you say which brand again instead of Rode video mics?
That is the name. ROD.
No, the one he prefers instead of them.
Oh, the Sennheiser NTGs.
No, the Rode NTG2 or 3.
Oh, yeah.
Sennheiser makes really Sennheiser's obviously, if you can afford it, it's a little more expensive, but yeah, Rode video mic is like an entry level. It's like $200. You get a boom pole and a microphone. I just think they're really cheap and the audio sucks.
I have, the person before me had some Rodes and they were all like useless. And because I have a husband who is partially in this industry, so he recommended that, and that one, the Sennheiser, and it's a really good quality. But I won't be able to buy anymore because of the budget cuts. I just thought I'd just, lament with you all.
We'll get through it. Just hold strong. We'll get through it. And I've said this throughout these entire 3 weeks of Camp TNI, that education now realizes how much they need video people. And now's the time for us to really kind of step up and step out and get on that map, that plane that we've always deserved to be on, but now's the time to really do that. So we'll get through this and, work with your administrations, do things that for them specifically. And when you go back to them and say, hey, I can't do that because I don't have the microphone I need, you'll be surprised how easy it is for that microphone to show up. May not happen this year, but it may be in a year or two now. So, All right. Well, thank you guys for being here.